Now, there's loads of factors why churches are on the decline. But it would be remiss of me, as we're just sailing through Exodus 1, to not mention something that struck me as to what's happened since the 1950s in Wales, by and large. And I say by and large because there are people who are faithfully doing their jobs and their churches still close, and they're not to blame. But by and large, there's a significant trend. And it's this. This church of worshiping the God of Genesis, and the God of Genesis, Father, Son, and Spirit, walked with them. And he would demand sacrifices for sin, because he took sin super serious. And he would call to his Father and rain down judgment on cities which were disobedient to him, because he had enough of their sin. He's not to be messed with, the God of this church. And in the UK around the 1950s, because I'm a bit of a church historian, not a big one, but I do know a little bit, pulpits, people like me, started to bottle and chicken out of preaching who God really is. And they came up with this really clever idea that if we snip parts of the Bible out and don't talk about them, basically judgment and sin and hell and anger, all that stuff, if that goes, we'll keep people happy and we'll grow. But actually what's happened, and you can trace it so clearly, pews have started to empty. It had the reverse effect. While ministers like me thought, I better keep everybody happy to keep my job, what's happened is most of them have lost their jobs. The irony is, there has become, as we've tried to not preach their God, the full God, that churches are closing because the world, in its suffering and grit, which need a message with backbone, and to be confronted why things are so messed up, they come to church and they haven't heard much in the last 50 years in Wales. There are exceptions. They need to hear about raw suffering and forgiveness and grit. They need that stuff, not a fluffy message with no backbone. Whilst we give out sandwiches and soup to our community, we also need to articulate the gospel. There's no other name given among men by which we must be saved. It's Jesus Christ. We need to do both. And in the West, we've become good at the soup stuff and not so good at this is our God. We need to fear him and obey him and speak in it. I'm always slightly depressed when clergy like me are represented in TV programs and films, and they are creepy weirdos with no backbone, and no one can trust them. And you let them do the car boot sale, but the horrors of the world, you'll keep that from him because he couldn't handle it. And I just think it's such a telling message of what we've become, many people like me. We've stopped being real in the UK years ago, and it's cost us. There are other messages and reasons as well why, but as we consider a church now on the ropes, in our situation, we do have to really think, what is our message that we're telling people? Do we really lift up Jesus, crucified for sinners? Because that saves planet Earth.